Hello, everybody. We're just doing a few things here, getting technically sorted. So I'm just going to rant. I'm going to get comfy. Good morning. Can you do me a favor? Can you tell me whether or not you can hear me properly? We've had some issues with the mic this morning. So could you please let me know if you can hear me loud and clear? So just talking about getting ready, getting warm. Let's loosen up our limbs, like get ourselves really ready for this rich conversation that we're about to have. So can you just let me know? Great. Yep, that's one. You can hear me clear? Okay, thank you, Matt D. That's so good. You can hear me clear. And also, if you do have a question later on, or you are going to make a comment and you don't want me to use your name, please say, don't mention my name. So good morning, Ali. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so you've got about 1 minute before I get ready to go live. So just hang in there. You can have a look around. Welcome to the home office. Hello, good morning. Somebody else has just joined us. So just if you can just be patient for about another 2 minutes, we're just waiting for people to hop on. And I want you to think about, before we really kick off, what does connection mean to you? What does intimacy mean to you? And what is, if you are old enough, I'm hoping you are if you're joining me, and you're never too old, what does sex mean to you? 3 very robust, large areas, which we're only going to just touch on today. So think about it just while you're sitting there. What does connection mean to me? What does intimacy mean? Do I have any in my life? Where do I feel and cultivate intimacy? And what does sex mean to me? So just have a little think about it. Hello, Camino. There's some amazing names coming in here. I'm not going to try and pronounce all of them, but it's really great to see you here this evening, this afternoon, this morning. There's lots of people from all around the world joining us. Okay, so before we get started, you might see me looking off camera. I have beside me my absolutely beloved, in Australia they call her Ali, but what she's actually called is Alejandra. I mean, I just feel sexy saying that name. I feel like I should do a little dance when I say Alejandra. Ali is going to be sitting to the side of me, and she is helping me because I'm what you might call technically challenged. Actually, I'm challenged in many ways, more than just technically. So she is going to be prompting me and reminding me and asking me questions to make sure that I cover everything that I wanted to cover this morning. So, or this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are. So if you see me looking off camera, hi, Ali, can you say hi? Hello. Ali has got this very sexy accent. She's Spanish, Colombian. So I automatically always feel like this kind of stunted, funny little hobbit around her because she is, as her voice sounds, absolutely delicious. So you'll meet her soon, I hope. Okay, we are going to, am I allowed to kick off? We're going to kick off. So welcome to Let's Talk About. And thank you for being with me today. Today very much is a pilot, as in we're testing out whether and how this works and also your response to it. So thanks for being here with me today and supporting the opportunity to turn really significant conversations that we often have in clandestine or think in our head but don't talk about into conversations that count and that are much more accessible to all. So why did I want to start Let's Talk About? It's fascinating. People have, for years now, asked me what I do. And I always find it quite challenging because I don't like to be categorized or pigeonholed. And in the last year, what I've realized is what I do and who I am and what I am about is all about the human experience. So the human experience is everything, right? I can only represent the human experience from a middle-aged white female's perspective, but one that has led a very rich and colorful life. However, what I find unique about myself is that, and what I feel has been a gift in my life, is that the human experience and all elements of it from a very wild and wonderful adventure of a childhood, from a very challenging and turbulent experience with my parents, a robust and remarkable and challenging and full of conflict and drama relationship with my father at different stages, all of those different aspects, which now I'm completely grateful, life, death, the film industry, becoming completely alone and broke, and grief, and all of those different experiences are the human experience, and millions of other little subtle shades in between. And I am a total human experience junkie. I'm fascinated by it. But the gift that I've been given is this curiosity gift. The desire to look at the human experience and not just look at it like open-hearted, like go straight through the middle of it, straight into the fire of it, want to feel it, you know, which has gotten me into trouble, let's be honest, in my younger years, wanting to experience it and those people in it, some of the darkest and challenging places of the human experience, learn about it, explore it. But then this is the piece, this is what makes me who I am and what I'd like to share with you, is experiencing it and then learning how to break it down, maybe experiencing some of the mistakes on behalf of you, and find a way of sharing it authentically and perhaps even teaching different ways of traveling through it. So I am a human experience junkie, and I am passionate about experiencing it, feeling it, and then converting it into knowledge, insights, with almost like a step-by-step. How do you go through it and experience in a way that is rich for you? Was that enough? Can I shut up now? Okay. Whew. Are you glad? We can go up. You can go forward now. Okay. So the next piece today, what we're going to be talking about is connection, intimacy, and sex. 3 very specific, necessary, and profound aspects of the human experience, not only to continue life, because we need to procreate to continue life, that's the sex part, but connection and intimacy being what, as the species of human beings, need to feel any sense of joy, to feel any sense of belonging, and to feel a sense of what it means to experience human emotion. So, as with everything I do, I'm going to try and narrate this talk, let's talk about, by sharing certain experiences, which is all I've had of my own life, and then exploring the learning within them and converting that into questions for you to explore. Now, hello from London, hello from Spain, people from everywhere joining us now. Now, could I ask you to be mindful as to how you're experiencing what I say? So if you feel deeply conflicted or resistant to something I'm saying, just explore it with curiosity. You don't need to write a savage response down below. Just explore this with inquiry, with curiosity. And can I ask you to just put judgment aside? Because one of the things I've learned in 20 years of being a coach and working with human potential is when we are willing to drop the judgment, we have the opportunity to learn. So let's come towards this conversation with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. The other thing I would request of you, just to do some housekeeping, is can you please write down any questions that I ask you, and or if you have any questions at the end, make sure you write them down so that you don't forget. And I will leave some space for question time at the end. Okay, so let's start with connection. What is connection? Well, when I think about what connection actually is, I first of all think about, when you plug something into the wall to get electricity. You might have a brilliant piece of technology, you might have a television, you might have a computer, but if you don't plug it into the wall to get electricity, it does nothing. It's flat, it's dead. Connection to me is where something sparks, and that is also creativity. So connection is something beginning, forming. But in the human experience, connection is very much a feeling. It's how we feel when we meet somebody, or we watch something, or we listen to something, or we see something that makes us feel a sense of life. It makes us feel a deep, deep emotion in here, which will ultimately make us think something. Connection for me is absolutely where we feel and find a sense of belonging. You know, when you have a conversation with somebody, or maybe you even these days, and particularly in these current times, watch a TV show or listen to a podcast, you suddenly feel like, you know, this story, this person, these words, they get me. I belong here in the center of it. And it's where we feel in that moment, usually two emotions, either a sense of ease. You know, when I feel deeply connected with somebody, I feel it's almost relief, right? It's like I've come home. And then also the other emotion that can be triggered is when we feel a deep sense of connection, where we suddenly feel a sense of belonging, a sense of home, a sense of joy, or as though something really gets to us. You know, you hear that phrase, it really spoke to me. Or people will often say, I saw you speak about this, or I read your post and it spoke to me. So often when we get that, the other emotion that we can experience, and that, like, this is the double-edged sword, my darlings, is we can then feel that sense of connection over here, and then we turn back to look at our own lives, our relationships, our community, our job. And with great sorrow, we realize that we don't feel that in the rest of our lives. And so then here's the tricky piece. We keep going back to maybe scrolling and following people or something that we aspire to where we feel that connection, or we bury ourselves in Netflix, or we go to the gym, which is what I used to do as a young person all the time, and lose myself to the adrenaline and jump around in my body where I felt connected to myself. And we cultivate connection with something over here and avoid this whole area, which is actually our life, where we actually need to face up to the fact that there is a misalignment and there is a lack of connection, which is where I come to the part of the conversation that comes back to what is connection. And connection starts not only with connecting with others, it starts with connecting with ourselves. When I deeply connect with myself, I know who I am. I know who I'm not. I know my strengths, I know the lovely bits about me, and I know the shitty bits about me, and I know the darker, shadowy sides about me. And I'm not necessarily okay with all of them, but I know who I am, and I have a connection enough with myself to recognize what and who is important to me. And so it comes back to that point of, why is it and what is it we need to do to cultivate connection? And what sabotages connection? So I'd love to press pause for a moment and ask you, where in your life or who do you feel deeply connected with? So when you think about that, who springs to mind? Or does your mind instantly go, I feel disconnected from everybody? One of the things I'm noticing consistently now through the remarkable, phenomenal television that is being written, you know, Netflix, Amazon, Stan, all of those just brilliant television shows that are being cultivated, where we're seeing actors who never ever considered doing television, you know, who thought it was really beneath them, now loving it because they get to spend 6 to 8 months to 10 years developing a particular character, developing a story. So what I'm noticing more and more and more, as we, particularly in these current times where we are in isolation and beyond COVID, there are a number of people living in isolation as well already, just because of the disconnection going on, we start to bury ourselves in other people's stories. So one of the things we do is we watch an incredible TV series where we get to know these characters. We even fall in love with these characters. We share their sorrow, their joy, their sex, their cynicism, their darkness. And in that, we start to cultivate a facade or manufacture a sense of connection. So I'll often speak to people when I ask them who are and where are the most deeply connected relationships in their life. And they'll actually talk about the fact that the connection they have is with either social media or with media of some sorts. So again, I'm asking you, where are you replacing external, deep, authentic connection with either a society, community, or those people around you, or maybe even your partner or wife? Where are you gaming with your friends and stepping away from relationships even with your children and your partner? So this is a very real challenge with finding the disconnection. Part of the disconnection is because we're manufacturing this almost facade of connection in other aspects. So I want you to take responsibility there for where you are or have ceased to create connection in the areas that matter extraordinarily as we move shortly into the conversation of intimacy, that next level of connection where we show up authentically, vulnerably, and authentically, I'll say authentically again, with other real human beings. Now, before I go any further, Ali is winking at me. What else should I say, Ali?
Are you going to share your story and the misunderstandings for you?
Yes, I am. So a bit about my story in terms of connection. So I grew up, as many of you know, with two remarkable parents and travelled from very cold, grey, little beautiful Wales in the United Kingdom all the way to the incredible shores all across the world, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all these remarkable countries. So I want you to imagine this little blonde, green-eyed beastie wandering around in a country where you were accepted, in a country where curiosity, joy, playfulness was the thing that bonded you. But I often found myself watching, being the observer, but never really feeling like I fit in anywhere. And so for me, having started my life in countries where you were included, whoever you were, whatever color your skin was, what background you came from, it was irrelevant. It was about the connection, the buzz of human connection that gave you inclusion. So traveling back from those wild and wonderful countries where you just were a part of a heartbeat of connection, and then back to cold, dark, quite conservative, white, the United Kingdom as a little hippie chick, I always felt on the outside. And I always was on the outside. And I felt myself observing and watching, and this constant desire started to build in me, along with a constant belief that I didn't really belong or fit in anywhere, but wanted to fit in everywhere. And so I found myself like an observer, just watching. And it was almost like looking for that little seedling, a little opening where there felt like there was some sense of connection and belonging. And I found that through communication, through being the funny girl, through throwing myself into really challenging situations. But as I became a young woman, one of the most dangerous things I did was I misunderstood connection for being included. So that sense of feeling included, I then manufactured in my mind as connection. So I'd love you to think about that, where in your life previously or currently does the fact that you are part of a community or your religion or simply a social structure or in the classroom or the group of mums or dads or the community that you hang out in, where does the sheer fact that you are a part of that and the inclusion give you a sense that you are and having deep connection, but actually it's not really there? And that's where I start to bring in the conversation of intimacy and authentic connection. As a teenager, a young woman, my deep need for connection and that deep need for intimacy and authenticity, which I experienced as a child in those countries where status meant nothing, where who you were and what you did meant nothing, whether your parents owned a house or rented a house or how nice your car went nothing. It was all about you and the connection you made. Moving back into a social structure where so much of it was based on how you looked, what you had, what you did, I just didn't know where to fit. And so that desire to try and fit anywhere to find connection often had me hanging out with some really shitty people and trying to be a part of them, trying to fit into something that I knew deep down felt so wrong and so misaligned to me. So again, I'm asking you, where are you misunderstanding that deep sense of connection and seeing inclusion, being included in a dynamic or a structure that makes you feel a part of something and yet makes you feel lonelier than you could possibly imagine, because I went through that for years and years of my life. And the other piece I want to bring in there is, as we start to talk about intimacy in a moment, is I also got lost. And one of the misunderstandings that I fell into was misunderstanding that deep sense of what I was looking for, which was connection and intimacy. I then started to look for in sex. So by cuddling somebody, by getting naked with somebody, by what you would think was the most intimate, wonderful thing in the world, the kissing or the beyond, I started to look at that as a way to find that love, to find that connection, to cultivate that intimacy. And as you may guess, you may have experienced, or you may need to know, it was the farthest thing from connection and intimacy you could possibly experience. When you find yourself alone with somebody in a vulnerable position, and the thing that is most absent is love or connection, it's the most harsh and brutal lesson you could possibly learn. So I ask you also to think about, in a way, again, without judgment. This is not about judging yourself or judging others. Maybe you're thinking, listening to me, about somebody you know. This is about with curiosity, exploring, where is it time for me to cut some of those unhealthy relationships or habits or behaviors that are actually doing the complete opposite to cultivating connection and ultimately intimacy, which is what I'm going to talk about in a moment, into my life. It wasn't until I met my beautiful late husband, and of course all my incredible friends, because I did make some wonderful friends and have just the most rich conversations and lives and fun and adventures with them. It wasn't until I met my beautiful late husband that I realized what connection was, what intimacy was. And again, I can only describe it as that sense of coming home. When you put on a jacket, it feels just right. And I remember driving home. I was with Andy, the late and great Andy, my late husband. And we just decided that we were going to go off on this wild and wonderful adventure from England to Australia. And we'd only been together, I think, 12 weeks, something very, very brief. And we went to visit his gorgeous old elderly grandmother in the north of England, because we thought we may actually not see her again, knowing that we were going to go off to Australia. And we went to see her and nibbled her very stale biscuits and got in the car. And the combination of realizing that perhaps we wouldn't see her again, and that thought about life and death and how impermanent life is, and then sitting in this car looking across at this beautiful young man, I was suddenly hit with this deep sense of having been searching the 24 years of my life that I had lived by then, searching and searching and searching for connection, searching for intimacy, searching for that place that felt like I had met the person to share my life with. And in that moment, I started howling, like that kind of really unattractive, snotty, like, and this poor guy's driving down the freeway and he has to pull off the road and he's like, what's wrong? Like, what is it? What is it? And he thought it was something to do with me being sad about saying goodbye to his grandmother. But what it was just this, it makes me want to cry thinking about it, but the relief of no longer feeling alone in the world, the relief of realizing that there was somebody that could know me, who could love me, who could accept me and allow me to accept me for all that I was and all that I wasn't. And that was about the deepest connection I could know, which was all about the ability to be intimate with somebody and share and show my deepest vulnerabilities. So I want you to think about, as I kind of cap off this whole conversation on connection and move into intimacy, a couple of questions for you to think about. Where are you manufacturing connection in areas of your life that actually have you supplement what's missing in real life? So where are you losing yourself in these beautiful, brilliant stories written in Netflix, or scrolling and looking for something to amuse you, entertain you, bring tears to your eyes, that you are manufacturing a sense of connection over here and somehow avoiding the need or the exploration or the adventure or the story you're telling yourself that there is no connection over here. So I want you to think about that. And again, this is not like a doom and gloom. This is all about where can we be mindful to look at our own human experience. What is it we're experiencing right now? And where is there opportunity to learn and grow and reframe it? So that's one question. Where are you cultivating a sense of connection over here that has you avoid cultivating connection over here? And most importantly, connection in here. Not me, not connection in me, in you. Okay. Ali, is there anything else you want me to say about connection?
No. Intimacy.
No. So, actually, there is one more thing I want to say. So I don't know how many of you have watched our documentary, the Be Here Now film, the Andy Whitfield story. And obviously Be Here Now comes from Ram Dass, which is all about the capacity for us to be in the moment, which is ultimately where connection can only ever happen, which is about being present and being deeply in the moment. Our documentary, the Be Here Now film, which was on Netflix, soon to be announced will be housed somewhere else, that allowed people, millions of people all around the world, to feel the deepest sense of connection and intimacy with my husband, with Andy, and me and our little family. And the reason it did was because we shared the no makeup, no frills version of a journey into the unknown, which basically meant, will I survive or will I die for Andy? And the journey of me trying to cope and navigate the possibility of not only his death, but also the death of my children's father. How would I go cope? How would they cope? So what people got to see and what you maybe got to experience that is the ups and downs, the excitement, the drops, the life and the death. What we don't normally share is all shades of ourselves. We show up with a certain projection of how we want people to see us or how we think we need to be for others. And in that film, because we basically just put some cameras in front of us and just shared that journey, it allowed people to feel such a deep sense of connection and intimacy with me that I have people sometimes walk up to me on the street and say, hello, I watched your film, and burst into tears and say, can I give you a hug? And it's as though they have journeyed through that section of life with us. And that level of intimacy, and when I say intimacy, that deep connection that they feel, it takes away from the fact that we've never, ever met before. They've watched it, so they feel it and they want to lean into it. Because it is so, as I mentioned before, it is so rich and wonderful for people to be able to connect on that level of authenticity, which we don't normally do. Now, one thing I wanted to say, and the reason I wanted to bring that up, was the reason we made that film was because going through cancer and going through the challenge of possibly losing life, possibly losing the person you love or leaving your life behind was so terrifying and made no sense. The way we got through it and the way Andy wanted to get through it was by creating deep connection and purpose. And that's why he wanted to make the film, and why we made the film was because we could create connection and intimacy with a global world. And that is all that matters. At the end of the day, that sense of connection with others is what really makes life worthwhile. Now, moving into intimacy. Ali, what am I talking about in terms of intimacy?
What's intimacy?
What is intimacy? Well, as you all know, because I've shared it with you, and probably a number of people can say, yes, I have literally shared it with you, Vashti, as a young, crazy woman. Intimacy is something that we often misunderstand for a couple of different things. We can misunderstand intimacy as inclusion. Because we are part of a group, or because we have a certain friendship, we might call that person our best friend because we've known them a really long time. We might even call that person our spouse, our husband, or our wife. And because we are together, we assume that there is intimacy. We assume because we're raising children together that there is intimacy. So inclusion can often be misunderstood for intimacy. Sex, getting naked with somebody, kissing somebody, genitalia rubbing together can be misunderstood for intimacy. But we soon know, and by the way, that's not what sex has to be. There's no judgment on that. I'm just saying that a number of us have lent into that physical connection by way of looking desperately to find intimacy. So what actually is intimacy? Well, my take on intimacy is about being able to be with someone or a group and to show up and connect at the deepest level. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be bearing your soul. That could be simply allowing someone to share how they're feeling and have a rant and have a cry, and you just silently, quietly sitting there holding space for them and letting them be just where they're at. It can be, intimacy can be showing up as not your greatest self and your friend holding space for that. Intimacy can also be sharing the most authentic version of yourself. How many of us get to show up like that? Not many. So I'm going to ask you, I want you to think about, where do you have intimacy in your life? Where do you feel that deep sense of connection with somebody that allows you to feel like you can be your complete self, that allows you to share all aspects of yourself, you know, like the funny, like, woohoo, this is who I am, and then that person that shares those thoughts, those darker thoughts that normally you hide behind. When I think about intimacy, I'm incredibly lucky, and sometimes there's detriment to it. My work allows me to be incredibly intimate, not with the sex part, but incredibly intimate with everybody that I come into contact with. Usually when I work with people, within 3 minutes, there can be a level of intimacy had between me and somebody I am working with beyond what they're experiencing their life in their relationship, because it's about holding space, allowing somebody to show up as exactly who they are, making somebody feel safe enough to be who they are and not feel that they need to be something else. So how do we create that sense of that space to cultivate intimacy? Well, as always, guess who it starts with? It starts with me, and it starts with you. Intimacy we can break down into, for this conversation, because it's a short conversation, we can break it down into 3 specific areas. Intimacy is about self-awareness. The self-awareness to recognize what is going on for you inside when you are with another human being. Are you thinking about what you need? Are you thinking about what you need to be heard saying? Are you thinking about getting it right? Are you thinking about rescuing them? Are you thinking about telling them how to solve a situation? So the first part is that self-awareness. Who do you tend to show up as for the people in your life? We all play different roles. And I'm going to be doing a class on this in the classroom in the next couple of months. We all show up playing different roles. You might be the rescuer. You know, you're the person that always is the problem solver. You're the person that says, can I do this to help you? You're always enabling others around you. You also might be, and I have this side, you also might be the control freak. You might be the one that always likes to tell people what they need to do or how they need to fix it or what they should do and have you tried this? So we all have these different roles that we show up as being. As a parent, we can often think that we need to tell our children what they do because we have so much wisdom and experience, or we might be so mixed up in what's going on for us that we spend our whole time telling them, commanding what we need them to do. But when we're trying to cultivate intimacy, what we need to first recognize is what is going on in me? Who am I showing up to be for this person? Whether it's a friend, whether it's a work colleague, whether it's a family member, whether it's my child, who am I being in this moment? Am I being authentically present for what is going on in this moment? Not what's happening 10 minutes ago or what I think needs to happen in the future, but what is happening right now and who am I showing up and being? Half the time, which is the second part of intimacy, is also communication. How are we communicating with somebody? Are we actually listening? And when I say listening, I don't just mean to listen to the words, but listening on an intuitive level. What is happening for this person? Why are they reacting the way they're reacting? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they saying what they're saying? What am I trying to suddenly do to control the situation? And what is it I am doing to communicate? Am I actually listening or am I speaking? Am I telling? So the other part of intimacy is all about listening. So listening for the intuitive sound of what you hear. What is it they're saying, that person? What is it they're not saying? What is behind their words? What is behind their actions? Can I listen for more than just the words with curiosity rather than judgment? Because I have to put my own biases aside. I have to put my judgments aside if I am actually going to create authentic intimacy and connection with another human being. It's a bit like whatever there was there before, I have to rub it out and show up being present in the moment as to what is actually playing out here. So much of the time, my darlings, we are in our head. It's like an animation. There's so much going on that we are absolutely not present. We're busy thinking about what we need to do, how to protect ourselves, how we don't, what we do, what we need them to do, how we can fix their pain. And the last thing we are is actually present. So intimacy is all about not only being aware enough of what's going on for you that you can put it aside or communicate it, but we can show up with the absolute ability to be present in this moment. What is happening for you? How can I connect with you on your level? What do I need to put aside? And what do I need to really listen for to cultivate that intimacy? Now, we also are terrified by intimacy. I mean, I don't have the stats, but I do know that, and this is a strange thing to go into, is that what we're seeing in our young, in Western culture, we are seeing in young men, and here's a strange thing, ready? Like alert, alert, I'm going to say something strange. We are hearing and seeing that there is a reptile dysfunction in young men, where horny teenagers should be like wildly, passionately within the right age, you know, bonking and having great times. All of a sudden, these young men, because of observing and watching sex and what they perceive to be intimacy, they're losing the ability to actually feel connection because they're so used to watching certain elements of porn. So all of a sudden, intimacy becomes sex and sex becomes stimulation. Now, going back to the conversation of intimacy, my point of bringing up the young men and erectile dysfunction is when they actually get into a moment of physical intimacy. We get into a moment of physical connection with another human being where we are in the same room, under the same sheets, in the back of the car, under the stars, whatever it is. They have no idea how to connect. They have a sense of how to watch and how to feel and how to reach a stimulus, but no idea how to feel that connection, that sensory connection, and enjoy intimacy through deep connection. So another question I have for you, having gone off on a bit of a Vashti tangent there, is where do you have what appears to be intimacy in your life, but actually a complete absence of it? So just a quick highlight. Intimacy, first and foremostly, is about having some self-awareness. Can I be consciously aware of what is going on for me when I am with not just another human being, but perhaps a group of human beings? There's nothing I love more, like being with you right now is being able to put all of my own crap aside and be present with you now to cultivate some sense of intimacy between us, that deep sense of connection. And we don't even know each other, right? So to do that, I need to put aside, am I doing a good job here? Is the technology working? What do they think? Does Ali have to put aside all of that stuff? I have to put aside caring what I look like, what to be with you now. So the first thing is the self-awareness. Who am I showing up as with people? Am I trying to be something that I need not to be in this moment? I don't need to fix the situation. I don't need to control the situation. What I need to be is just here in the moment and present, which means I need to put busy life aside temporarily and stop focusing on the future temporarily, which is another conversation when we talk about leadership. The second part of intimacy is actually communication. We'll talk about resources later in terms of books and things you can read. But when we start to recognize as well what intimacy means in languages of love for different people, that also adds a whole other spectrum. So if I am communicating love for another person, how are they perceiving that communication? So is it through touch? Is it through words? Is it through doing nurturing special things to create that desire to feel intimate with you? So I'll give you a book reference later on. So communication is key. And I come back to the most paramount piece, which is listening. But remember, listening is not just about listening for words. It's about deeply listening intuitively to what is going on for somebody, where they are at right here, right now, what they are saying, what's behind their words. Are you listening to what they're saying? Are you listening to their body language, their gestures? Are you listening for what they actually are saying in their words and for what they're not saying as well? And the third and final piece of intimacy is recognizing where you can create a deeper sense of intimacy through vulnerability, through showing up as yourself and sharing yourself in a way that makes it safe for somebody to be themselves too. You know that thing it makes me think of? It's a funny thing. It's, you know, when you're young and you've got your first girlfriend or boyfriend and you're trying to be all perfect. I don't know if you've ever done this, but sort of maybe staying the night, like not necessarily together, but a sleepover. I remember going into the bathroom and like putting foundation on and full makeup on so that I kind of looked what I thought was perfect the next morning. The opposite to authenticity, right? I'm not saying don't look gorgeous or do make yourself feel great, but where is it you're trying to be something that is not you? And why are you trying to be something that is not you and then asking somebody to show up as their authentic self, right? So that other third piece, self-awareness, who am I showing up as? What role am I playing and what do I need to put aside to create that intimacy? The second is communication. What am I really listening for and what questions am I asking and how am I sharing through my words that demonstrates intimacy? How am I showing that I'm worthy of intimacy? And the third piece is vulnerability. What can I share of myself that makes you trust me? Making the documentary, that vulnerability, that willingness to allow people in, as I will always do, to the corners of my life that people often hide for the desire to facilitate growth, transformation, and just connection, that allows us to create intimacy. So where can you be more vulnerable? Where could you impact everyone with your vulnerability? Now, Ali's, that's me looking to the side. She's like, question there. So something I want to say before I move into the last and final part, which is, let's talk about sex, baby. I'm being told I've got 5 minutes. The last part that I want to talk about in terms of intimacy is this. A question, I move out of the light. A question that I get asked all the time is this. How did you cope with and I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment. How did you cope with having such a gorgeous, like handsome, beautiful husband, boyfriend, partner? How didn't it send you mad? He was like so attractive. But then the next question that came when he was in the show Spartacus, Blood and Sand was, how on earth did you cope? Weren't you so jealous? Didn't it drive you crazy that he was rolling around naked with beautiful women? And believe me, when people literally used to write in, how can you cope with your husband being with somebody so much more beautiful than you? How do you cope with your husband kissing and getting naked with other people? Doesn't that drive you wildly insane? Doesn't that make you so jealous? How do you deal with it? You're so strong. So here's the thing, and I really want you to hear this. The naked bits, the kissing, That didn't bother me at all. Sex is sex, but intimacy and love and connection are a whole different thing. When you've looked after somebody to their death, when you've nurtured a dying body, you love that person so passionately that the ego drops away. You're not worried about whether your abs look good when you can't go to the toilet by yourself. It's all about love and connection. The wonderful thing about mine and Andy's relationship was that love and intimacy and connection beyond the physical. So it never bothered me at all, the nakedness. I thought it was cute and cheeky. And by the way, I'm far worse. I'm always window shopping. I find human beings beautiful. I'm always looking at boobs and bums and chests. I think human beings are gorgeous. So the sex part, the kissing part, the biology part never, ever fazed me. However, what was deeply challenging, and when I work with the entertainment industries and also couples where they are often not only having to do nudity and cultivate and manufacture intimacy together, where the problem lies in, and this is where we go back to the beginning, not the sex, but the disconnection. And often in relationships where they break down and we use words like cheating or affairs, it's not usually about that that's the problem. It's where there is a disconnection in the relationship, where we have been together for a really long time, or as parents, what actually holds you together after years is your children. It's where you've forgotten what your values are, or you don't know what the other person these days enjoys or what they're about. We've stopped listening. So where the problem, and if there were ever a challenge for Andy and I, where the problem lay was where there was a disconnection, because there either wasn't enough time or enough effort and focus put on creating that connection and re-getting to know each other, or, and I really want you to hear this, a lack of intimacy. So when he was filming in a complete other world, living that Spartacus world in the sets of, with these incredible sets in the cold, the mud, walking around naked in a loincloth, and I was at home with two small babies, away from somebody I had been with almost every day, all day, who would leave the house at 5 a.m. and come in at 9 p.m., the level of intimacy and connection between us was at its all-time lowest. So where the challenge began, where there was, if ever, a tiny problem, was where the disconnection formed. But because of communication, because of authenticity, because of a commitment to a set of values that was based on communication, based on fun, and based on authenticity, we went off, we got some therapy, we sat there, talked about the challenges, and we reconnected. Because the only thing that was absent, the only challenge that there was not the naked, was where there was a lack of intimacy and connection for our friendship and the basis of our relationship. So be mindful of where there is jealousy. Be mindful of where you fear somebody connecting with somebody else, because most of the time it's not about physical attraction. It's because the basis of your relationship, A, is not aligned in a deep connection, and or B, doesn't have the level of intimacy through values, through understanding each other, your wants, your needs, and a lack of communication. So that's the last thing I want to say on intimacy. Finally, sex. Sex is a topic which is worthy of its own Let's Talk About. So I am going to be running the 5th talk along, Let's Talk About Sex, where I want to break it down. I want to talk about some of the great writers and therapists that talk about sex, like Ester Perel, and break down, demystify, destigmatize the judgment around what sex is and isn't, where it has intimacy and love, and where it's a joy and a pleasure and delight. But for the sake of today, which is about misunderstandings, about expectations, and about how to bridge the gap in terms of connection and intimacy, I want to talk about sex being something that we need to have an understanding of the intention behind it. You know, I've referenced all the way through this talk, are you going into this physical experience expecting connection, expecting intimacy, expecting love, expecting loyalty? Is that what you're going in for? Are those the values that you're seeking? Or Are you going into sex wanting some pleasure, wanting some deep desire to be felt and experienced? Because they are two very different things that both are allowed to be. So when we talk about sex, we really want to get a sense of what our relationship is to sex. And that can change. We can have desires, we can have fantasies that are completely different from the actual sexual relationships we want to have. One of the biggest issues that happens with sex in a long-standing relationship is that when we have been with somebody an incredibly long time, and perhaps they almost begin to feel like, this sounds a bit strange, but I don't mean it to, they begin to feel almost like a best friend, even a brother or a sister. What starts to happen is all of those kind of desires and the naughty bits kind of go out the window, because when we feel deep intimacy, it kind of often knocks out the fantasy, knocks out the really hot, steamy business, because it's much more of a nurturing kind of relationship. And we start to think about sex over here in a much more kind of fantasy, naughty, desire way, which can often then lead to us thinking that the way we find our way back to that steaminess is by going over here, which is often where problems can come up in relationships. So moving forward, and let's talk about number 5, let's talk about sex on the horizon. We'll break that down further so that we can find our way to understanding what sex means to us and how we can perhaps bring it back into our relationships in a richer way. But for now, what I'd like to leave you with is just the awareness and the question, what is sex for you? Is it about intimacy? Is it about desire? Is it about gratification? What is it to you? And what do you want it to be? So on that note, some of the key questions that I want to leave you with as we began. Where are there misunderstandings for you? And are your expectations not being met? Because what you actually desire and want more than anything is deep connection, is deep intimacy. Or maybe you don't want either of those, and what you really want is some fantastic sex over here. And what you're realizing is that's what's missing. So the question for you is, in your life, where are you at and where are you not in terms of connection? What could you let go of and invite into your life in terms of vulnerability, in terms of authenticity, in terms of the self-awareness of how you're operating in your world? And where could you let people in just that little bit more? And conversely, where could you, in that desire to be included, start to think about that perhaps that community, perhaps that environment, perhaps that relationship are as far away from authenticity, connection, and intimacy as they could possibly be, and it may be time for you to courageously and bravely entertain that it might be time to embrace your authentic self and look elsewhere. Now, there are some tremendous writers and speakers and therapists and doctors that talk about connection, that talk about intimacy, that talk about sex. So I am going to bang out a few in the resources section below. I hope that you have got some value out of my little banter. Let's talk about, remembering that this is just a general conversation to provoke thought as to how can I embrace aspects of the human experience in order to grow myself, in order to learn from, and in order to give back just that little bit more. So I'm going to shut up for a couple of minutes and I'm just going to let you type your questions. So what questions do you have? Can you write them very short and specific? This is your chance to go off and get on with your evening or your day or your lunchtime. But for those of you that would like to stick around for a couple more minutes, I've got, what questions do you have?
We got a question from someone that sent it in an email. So maybe we can start with that one if they have time to write.
What's the question, Ali?
There was a question about, so how can you find that connection when you don't have a partner? You know that you and Andy had an amazing relationship, and then what about now? What happens after? Or how come people that have no partnership can find that?
Yeah, so if you can't hear gorgeous Ali's beautiful voice in the background, we just got a question which was, when you don't have a partner, How do you find that gorgeous connection? If you don't have a relationship to work on or build more, how do you cultivate that rich connection? That is an incredible question, and something that many of my clients have come to me with. Connection, I believe, first and foremostly, it starts with you. Now, I know that's not a great answer when you're like, I want to talk to other people. And especially in times like now, in COVID times where we're in isolation, it's particularly hard. But where I would start, sorry, I've got those disgusting like white bits from talking too much. Where I would start is to ask yourself what connection means to you. What is most important to you? And I'm going to use the word values. So if you think about what you value most, I don't mean what your goals are, but what you value most. If you value connection, or if you value creativity, or if you value, what's another great value, Ali? Freedom. Think about what that means for you, and where and who would also value those same things. Now, what I mean by that is if I think about a core value of creativity, and I think about what do I associate with creativity? Well, straight away, I'm looking at my bookshelf and I think about amazing Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote The Big Magic, Eat, Pray, Love, her Broadway Girls, and I just have a total girl crush on her human existence. I look at, okay, well, if I love that, who else would love that? And how can I connect with people that share that similar connection? So I would instantly, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but I would instantly want to sign up for, or go to, when we're allowed to, go to a bookshop. And I would start to speak to people that share the same interests, that share the same curiosity. Now, don't forget, I am the weirdo that talks to absolutely everybody, however, wherever, whenever. So the other aspect of that is, where might you have to be brave and courageous and put yourself in environments, not compromising your boundaries, to connect with other like-minded people. And that's where sometimes we have to really put ourselves out on a limb, sign up for something, do an online course where there is connection and communication and talking. But also the other piece, and I really want you to hear this, is when we be of service, and I know that statement gets overused, when we get involved, when we volunteer ourselves, we meet other like-minded people, and that is also often where connection takes place. But the third and final piece I will say about how we create connection is all about communication. It's all about having and being present in the conversations you have with everyone, because that is where conversation sparks. Whether it's the barista, whether it's the person that you sat next to every day and never had a conversation with, that is where it begins. Now, the other thing, and I'm not a big advocate for pushing social media, but I have met some incredible people through Instagram and speaking to like-minded. Stop following people that make you feel shit. Follow people that are inspiring and align with your values, and start conversations. Start real rich conversations with people that are in alignment with you. Now, I have to wrap up now, but what I will do is I will take your questions and I will do an Instagram post answering all of the questions one by one that you have posted up now, because there's a sudden surge of them, and I've got to jump on another talk now. So I wanted to say thank you to you for joining me for Let's Talk About. Please feel free to write your comments below. Write whatever you want to write. You know, if you've got something that you want to criticize, please do it productively in terms of what you would like me to do differently rather than just criticizing. If you've got something of value, please write it down. And also, if you want more, what would you like? So that's it from me and Alejandra. Nothing but love, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye for now. Yeah.
It's fine. It takes time. So when you're talking, you're still there. Oh, there you go. See you now. We're still live.
Oh, we're still live. Bye.